Welcome. This week we'll be talking about processes on networks. What this will entail is understanding how the underlying structure can affect a process such as diffusion. So we'll do a little bit of review. This is pretty much what you did for your second homework assignment. We'll look at diffusion in Erdős-Rényi random graphs. We'll look at it in scale-free random graphs. And something you haven't done before, we'll look at diffusion in small world networks. But, what we've seen so far is simple diffusion. That is, anyone who's infected can infect any one of their neighbors with some probability. However, not all diffusion is that simple. For example, when individuals are looking to adopt a new product, it may not be sufficient that they see just one of their friends has made that purchase. Perhaps they want to see until several of their friends have done the same. It becomes even more complex once there are so-called network effects in these decisions. So for example, if you're trying to decide between two different chat clients, some of your friends are on one chat client, the others are on another, which one are you going to choose? And it depends on how many friends are on each and how good the product is. And we can add an additional wrinkle, which is that perhaps you don't have to choose. Perhaps you can use both chat clients. However, this comes at an additional cost. You can't remember which friend is on which network, or you have to learn how to use both of them, etc. And this leads to rather different product adoption dynamics. We'll talk briefly about collective action. This is, for example, individuals choosing whether or not to go out and protest. Each of them might have a given criterion depending on, I'll go out if at least 3 people, including myself, go. So if I see that if I can coordinate with 2 of my friends and we all go out, I will be happy protesting. But people might have different criteria, so how can you determine whether a protest is going to occur or not? We'll also talk about innovation. Now, you might have an idea of, the lone innovator, the lone person who works at their desk and scribbles some formulas and then comes up with a brilliant idea and doesn't need to really exchange ideas with anyone else. They just patent it and get rich. However, a lot of innovation actually happens through networks, and part of it is that you imitate, that you use things that others have developed that work and then perhaps improve upon them further. So how does the network topology affect the process of innovation? And finally, we'll look at kind of collective problem solving, where you need to do something, but your correct answer depends on what others' correct answer is. So let's get to it. First, we'll go back to diffusion in Erdős-Rényi random graphs. I'm going to set up the network. And here, the main parameter is the number of nodes in the network and the average degree. And what you can do is then adjust the average degree and set up the network. You can actually go from average degree of 2.5 to something like 5. And for now, I'm just going to say the infection rate is going to be 1. That is, if my neighbor is infected at a previous time step, they're going to infect me at the next time step. And I'm going to simply spread the infection. So here's step 1, 2, 3, 4. We can observe that. Now I'm going to lower it down to 2.5. I'm going to set up the network, and I'm going to do the same thing. 1, 2, 3, 4. Looks different, doesn't it? I can lower it further, maybe just average degree 1.1, just above the percolation threshold. And now if I do 1, 2, 3, 4, see what happens. So I think we're ready for our quiz question. So this is just a recap of what happened. And the quiz question is, when the density of the network increases, the diffusion in the network is, and your choices are faster, slower, unaffected. So hopefully what you concluded was that the denser the network, the faster the diffusion. So if the average degree is 5, in 4 time steps, you had a lot of the nodes infected. And furthermore, if the density of the network falls to a really low value and you're just at the percolation threshold or below, in fact, the disease or whatever it is may not spread at all because there's not enough connectivity. So even if it had infinite time, it would never break out of the little network fragment where it was located. So now let's consider the effect of diffusion in networks which occur because nodes are added over time. These are growing networks. And we're going to look at two situations, one in which there's preferential attachment, meaning that new nodes who join the network will preferentially attach to existing nodes that have high degree, are hubs, have lots of neighbors. In the second example, the network's going to be grown non-preferentially. That is, the new node is just going to pick one of the existing nodes at random. So let's see what that might look like. So here I will, let's see, we can first grow it non-preferentially. Let me just set that up again. And now I'm going to, I think, again, move the infection rate to 1 just to speed things along. And now I'm going to say take, let's see how many steps. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, 5 steps, and I've infected some portion of the network. It's not too bad. Now I'm going to grow the network preferentially. I'm going to click Setup, and now I'm going to take the same number of steps. So I'm going to click Spread once. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I've basically managed to infect most of the network. So going back, just to make sure we know what we're doing, when nodes preferentially attach to high degree nodes, the diffusion over the network is faster, slower, or unaffected. Hopefully you figured out that it's faster when we have preferential attachment. And this is the same observation as always. That is, when you have hubs that are extremely well connected, what's going to happen is they're going to get rapidly infected, right? If any one of their many friends has the infection, they will pass it on to them. And next thing you know, now they can infect all of the rest of their neighbors who hadn't been infected before. So having having hubs in the network really does accelerate the spread of anything, disease, information, etc. within the network. As long as you have these simple rules, that is that with equal probability, here we'd set it to 1, anyone who's infected will infect their neighbor at per time period. Next, we turn to small world networks. If you remember from last week, what made a network a small world was a high degree of clustering, here accomplished by putting the nodes along a ring lattice such that each node is connected to its 4 closest neighbors, and then adding some shortcuts. And what these shortcuts are going to do are make the average shortest path small, close to that of a random graph, while still maintaining a high degree of clustering. So let's go to the NetLogo model for this, and I'm going to at first have no recovery. So in this model, a node is susceptible, and then once it's infected, it stays infected. So some diseases operate like this. Unfortunately, there's no cure. So once you're hosting that disease, you're a host. So we're going to set up the network, and we're going to infect 1, and we're going to allow the disease to spread. And here the speed is somewhat determined by this probability of infection. So I guess I could, well, let's just keep it right there at 0.24. And now we're going to allow it to spread. and you can see what's going on. And we can then add a little bit of rewiring probability. This might be all we need. And we're going to repeat the process. So we're going to allow it to spread. And this hopefully will allow you to answer the quiz question, which is, as the probability of rewiring increases, the speed with which the infection spreads, does it increase, decrease, or remain the same? So going back to NetLogo, so hopefully you saw that the infection can spread more rapidly if it can use the shortcuts that we gave it by rewiring the network. Now let's add this probability of recovery. And what this is going to do is, with some probability, an infected node is going to go back to being susceptible, which means that it doesn't currently carry the infection. It can't infect its neighbors, but it's ready to be infected again. So let's have no rewiring, and we're going to set up a network. And here's one infected node, and then we're going to try and see if this will spread. So we see the infection kind of growing slowly, and it's hanging in there. Oh, this is actually pretty suspenseful, but it dies out. Now let's try this with a little bit of rewiring, maybe 5%. And see what happens. Now, naturally, sometimes the disease will die out because the nodes recover before they can really infect a lot of others. So I might have to reinfect the network a few times to get what I'm after here. So I'm going to allow it to spread. This time it died out, so I'm going to try and reinfect, see what happens. So you should be seeing qualitatively a different behavior in the case of the presence of rewired edges versus the plain lattice. And I'll let you examine this more in the assignment.